Well, thank you for hanging around. It's quite a nice day out there. I've been chuffing off, having a bit of a walk, going down to the pub or the beach. It's nice to see you still here. I'm going to keep it very quick. We talk a lot about working, when we do a lot of work with governments at all levels. We do a lot of work with industry. One of the particular areas I think is increasingly important is actually to work with property developers, because certainly in a country like Australia, they have a huge role in what gets built. So it's not really, I mean, governments set parameters, but it's not really governments that decide what gets built where. It is the property industry. This is just a quote from a few people some of you are probably familiar with. A consensus around integrating planning, urban design, climate science policy, bringing about desirable microclimates, compact, pedestrian-friendly cities, addressing both mitigation and adaptation. So, well, that kind of sums it all up, what we're trying to achieve. But it's a good statement, and we'll get back to the references in the last slide so you can see who actually said it. But like I say, the people, possibly even some of them in the room today, but certainly people who you know. So as I said, with respect to collaboration with governments, and in Australia that's looking at particularly local government, state government to some degree, probably less federal government, but certainly there's a long history overall in relation to these sort of practical issues around climate change, around built environment and so on. So there's a long history, and UNSW is no exception. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because you've already heard quite a bit of it today about the High Performance Architecture Research Cluster and also Climate Resilient Cities Lab, which is another part of built environment. What they've been doing, collaborating largely with government agencies, government partners, but also with industry to deliver evidence-based interventions aimed at achieving practical outcomes around mitigation and adaptation. So we heard a few of those today, a few others there around Darwin, Alice Springs, Victoria. Heard about the city of Port Phillip, also Canberra, Wollongong, this project there on resilience and urban heat. Probably less common, but at least as important, if not in some ways more important, given what I just said about the role of developers in developing, as the name suggests, built form in our cities. At least as important, but less common, probably, than working with governments, has been collaborations with the property development industry. It's been, again, there's been some examples going back some years. One that comes to mind, I was just talking to Deo about when we were having our early lunch or late morning tea, whatever it was. Very nice it was too. And that was the project around the Olympics and the greening of the Olympics back in 2020, which is well before I got involved in the academic world. But that was a partnership amongst others with Lend-Lease, it's a building company. So what I want to talk about very briefly now is collaboration we finished last year with a major, probably lesser known, but it's still quite a big one, a company called Malta Australia. They've been working on a project in Western Sydney. It's called Norwest because it's in the northwest, so certain logic to that. The ultimate aim is to house 15,000 residents, over 2,000 businesses, providing quite a bit of employment. So it's not just a residential suburb, looking at offices and industry and retail and so on, 60,000 workers. And they decided, as the parent developer, the owner of the land for Norwest, Malta decided right from the start, from the initial design stage, to focus on sustainability and livability. And particularly given the location, which is, it's not actually quite the hottest part of Sydney, because it's a bit further north, it's a bit hillier, a bit more wooded, but it still is very much hotter than coastal areas of Sydney. So strategies around mitigating urban overheating was a major part of their targets that they set for the development, which included having a drop of 2 degrees in ambient temperature as their main target around climate. So the partnership started in 2020. It was a bit slowed down because of the COVID pandemic, but the intent there was to first off get the science happening, to develop that evidence base to then inform the planning and design response. So the intent to be to combine existing knowledge and creating a new knowledge around this particular precinct to understand how it handles heat at the moment and assess ways to mitigate heat impacts through a range of different approaches around buildings, infrastructure, roads, landscape design, and so on. So the end result, which I'll talk a little bit more about as we move further on, was informed by a couple of years of monitoring and analysis of the present microclimate to enable prediction of future performance, climatic performance in a warming world. And that side of it around development of a sensor network and so on, I wasn't directly involved in. I came in more later on relating to the planning and design guidance. But there was a very strong emphasis at that time on getting the best possible evidence by using sensors, by using Bureau meteorology data and a whole range of other types of data to get that evidence base right. So that part of the project was led by Dr. Nega Nazarian, who unfortunately is not here at the moment. I believe she's overseas again, at a climate conference of some description, which is where she does a lot of her work. It's very good. And various other names you'll see there, some of us around today, and using data sets provided also by BOM and University of Melbourne. So it's quite a bit of collaboration going on to get that evidence coming in. A couple of images there. The top image, the top right image, shows an aerial shot of Norwest with the location of the sensors around there. And then the bottom slide shows a particular part of the site around the central Norwest and Bella Vista stations, railway stations, looking at the interaction between climate and existing urban form. So you can see where potential future heat stress, the areas which are in red versus areas which are either green or in some cases water features where there's the blue colouring to indicate that. So that was, I won't go into the detail about the science. As I said, this is a quick report today, but findings from that sensor network and the simulations and so on that were done at the time, combined with the literature, obviously looking at the sort of work that people have been doing, including people in this room for many years, also previous projects by the UNSW Built Environment, were all combined together to develop that robust evidence base to inform an urban design cooling guide for Norwest. So that was the ultimate outcome of the project in terms of the practical impact. Of course, there was a lot of impact as well in relation to the climate science side of things, but the practical impact for the industry partner was the development of this design guide, which involved precinct-specific recommendations and principles, a toolkit of interventions tailored to the sort of, not just the location, but the type of built form, the characteristics of built form, which the developer was interested in implementing in that particular part of the world. And then that led into the capacity to quantify the amount of cooling provided by those interventions. So the image there on the right-hand side, that's just the cover of the design guide to give you an idea of the sort of built form that in some cases has already been built, in other cases they are planning over the next few years. And just to look at some images from the guide, you'll see in the captions there's references to, lo and behold, the CRC for low carbon living. So low carbon living, CRC, it is the gift that keeps on giving. So we're still using information coming out of that in order to inform our work. So some of these images looking at cool roofs, looking at misting capacity for water features, looking at how to lay out subdivisions and blocks and so on, where to locate greenery, linking all of these things together and coming up with, down at the bottom right, a set of different cooling strategies for different building types. So obviously commercial buildings, industrial buildings, or high-rise apartments. This particular one, particular slide or particular graphic is showing residential, so different types of residential. There will also be industrial, commercial, and so on buildings in Norwest. We've got separate guidance for those in the design guide. It's about 70 pages on, so all that information is in there in it. So I'm going to wind up. As I said, keep it on a relatively short basis. We think it is the first in Australia as a cooling guide for not some a generic council or a generic city, but for a whole development project, a specific project, tailor-made for that project. And as such, we see this as a significant and innovative model, which can be rolled out potentially for other development projects in other parts of Australia, with that similar science-based evidence used to inform the practical interventions. Now, just to conclude with, I think, the key takeaway for this type of project, and this is something which makes me feel fairly positive about the future. When you're getting statements like this, you do some work for a client, for a partner, and they often say, well, you've done this work for us, we're going to hang on to it, thank you very much. You can put out a journal article or whatever, that's fine, but we're going to take the substantive work for ourselves. What Malfa has said, very specifically from the general manager, it's a template for others to use and adapt to their own projects. We're happy to help our competitors with this. Results could pay us all back in spades. And that, I think, is a bit of a breakthrough and something we really need to encourage amongst our industry partners. So thank you.